Hi, I'm Chuck Fax. I've been asked to share some thoughts regarding my favorite part of the high holidays. Rosh Hashanah is great, of course, and the food is plentiful and delicious. But my favorite holiday is Yom Kippur, or more precisely, a specific set of prayers during the Musaf service. To be sure, Kol Nidre is in a class by itself, but it comes too early in the holiday, before we've barely gotten into our seats. And anyway, it's too short, in my opinion. What I look forward to the most in the Yom Kippur service is a part of the service that many folks like to skip over, and that is the Avodah, which consumes a significant portion of the Chazan's repetition of the Musaf service. The Avodah recounts the ritual performed by the Kohen Gadol at the temple on Yom Kippur. The ritual actually starts with the Kohen Gadol's preparation 7 days before the holiday. I will paraphrase the English translation in the Birnbaum Machzor, which is the Machzor we used in the synagogue where I grew up, and which contains a literal translation of the Hebrew throughout the Avodah, unlike the Silverman Machzor, which in parts paraphrases and in parts simply ignores the Hebrew narrative. 7 days before Yom Kippur, the Kohanim escorted the Kohen Gadol from his home to an apartment in the temple, where they rehearsed him for his service for Yom Kippur. Elders were commissioned to practice with him every day. On the appointed day, he would bathe 5 times and then enter the temple. Facing west, he placed his hands upon his own sin offering and made confession. We are all familiar with the refrain that comes next. Ana Hashem, Chatati, Aviti, Pashati Lefanecha, and so on. When the priests and the people who were standing in the temple court heard Hashem's glorious and revered name clearly expressed by the Kohen Gadol with holiness and purity, they fell on their knees, prostrated themselves, and responded, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. And then they all repeated the ritual. And of course, what follows after that is the ritual of the 2 goats, one selected as a sacrifice and one la'azazel. But neither of those timeless stories is the part of the Avodah that grabs me. Rather, it is what follows when the high priest enters the Kadosh Kadoshim. Before he enters the Kadosh Kadoshim, the oldest priest admonishes the Kohen Gadol, consider whose presence you are about to enter. Know that if you fail to concentrate your mind on what you are about to do, you will at once fall dead, and the atonement of Israel will not be attained. I remember once when I was reading that language, I thought to myself, if I were the Kohen Gadol, that warning alone would terrify me and cause me to lose my concentration. And then I'd die. But the elderly priest continues with his exhortation to the Kohen Gadol. He says, the eyes of all Israel are upon you. Remember that you are about to come before the Supreme King who sits upon a throne of justice and destroys all evil. And invariably, the Kohen Gadol, who is obviously made of stronger stuff than I am, replies that he has searched his deeds and he has repented. And then he slaughters his own bullock and enters the Kadosh Kadoshim with an offering of fragrant incense. And now, this is the part that I love. This is the part that I look forward to every year. The Kohen Gadol sprinkles the blood of the bullock once upward and 7 times downward. And as he does, he counts out his movements. Achat, achat v'achat, achat v'shtayim, achat v'shalosh, and so on. In the congregation where I grew up, When Chazan Perlmutter reached that climactic moment, the men surrounding me would rise and count along with the Chazan. In fact, they shouted and held their fingers up to signify the count. My father, seated next to me, and Dr. Markovitz, who sat immediately in front of me, and Al Bloom and Nordy Rappaport, who sat just behind us, and Saul Feinberg and Herman Engelberg, who sat together in the front row. All of them, and dozens more, would stand and shout out, Achas, Achas v'Achas, Achas v'Shtayim, Achas v'Shalosh, and so on. And then the Kohen Gadol emerges from the Kadosh Kadoshim, slaughters a goat, and repeats the ritual in front of the people. And again, the men in our shul would stand and shout as they counted out along with the Chazan. I once asked my father whether it wasn't unseemly that they created all of this commotion in our shul in the midst of the Chazan's recitation of the Musaf. And my father responded as follows. Think about what was going on at the temple. There were all these animals about to be slaughtered. They were terrified, and they must have been making an awful noise. And think of the smell. And there were thousands of people standing around. And the Kohen Gadol is up there tossing blood this way and that. So the scene was bloody, smelly, crowded, and noisy. It bore no resemblance whatsoever to the dignity and decorum of a modern service, no matter how solemnly the text reads. And so, my father continued, for a moment, those of us who jump up and shout the count along with the Chazan try to reimagine for ourselves the cacophony at the temple on the holiest day of the year. And that is where my thoughts are every year when I hear the Chazan chant that portion of the Avodah. It was a long time ago, and they are all gone now, my father and his friends, the men who surrounded me in shul. But I can still hear their joyous shouting as the service proceeds, and I am confident that others hear it too. My best wishes to all of you for a happy, healthy, and safe new year.